Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. Well, I just want to talk a little bit today about my iPhone 16 Pro, which I've had for, it's coming up on 3 months or so now. And specifically, I want to talk about the 48 megapixel quad bare sensors in this phone. And this is not the only phone that uses quad bare sensors. I mean, any phone that uses a 48 megapixel quad bare is probably the same Sony sensor that this iPhone uses. But there are others. Other cameras have 40 megapixels and 50 megapixels quad bare sensors. So we're going to talk about that. But before I get to that, I'm going to talk about the cameras. Here's my feeling about these cameras. The Fusion camera, the main camera, is very, very good. I mean, it's very good. It's got a fairly large sensor for a phone. It's a 48 megapixel quad bare sensor. The telephoto camera, the 5X telephoto camera, 120 millimeter equivalent. It is just a regular 12 megapixel sensor. It is fairly small. Quality out of it, actually, if the light's decent, is pretty good. I mean, it's decent, not awesome. The ultra wide, however, it's a 48 megapixel quad bare sensor, but it's not a big sensor. It's the same size as the previous ultra wide sensor. The main problem with the ultra wide sensor camera is the lens, because the lens is only sharp in the center. It gets really mushy towards the edges. And when I bought the phone, I thought, wow, they did this upgrade, and I was really hoping that it would at least give decent performance. And honestly, you know, if you're taking any kind of landscape or anything, you're just going to have soft edges all around. Better off using the panoramic setting and doing a panorama using the main camera, because that should be, you know, the sweep panorama, that should be pretty decent. That's unfortunate. Now, the thing about that lens is that it's sharp in the center. So when you use this phone for macro, like when you get close, it automatically switches to the ultra wide camera, but it crops to the center. So that's why the macro photos taken with the ultra wide actually are not bad, because it's cropping into that sharp center portion of the lens. Let's talk about the quad bare sensor. If you don't know what that is, I'm going to link to an article down in the description that kind of goes into it. But essentially what it is, if you're at all proficient or knowledgeable about digital photography, you know that image sensors, whether they be CMOS or CCD, do not see color out of the box, off the shelf, whatever. They don't see color. And I spent the better part of 3 decades selling scientific imaging systems, including CCD sensor systems. And they're all monochrome. You know, we used colored filters if we wanted to detect some different colors, but they're all monochrome sensors, and they were scientific grade. We use them for life science, you know, biomedical research, but they're probably originally designed to do astronomy, because, you know, a low light signal is a low light signal. But one of the things that we did in all of those systems is that in the software, you could do what was called pixel binning. By pixel binning, I mean you take pixels and take an array of them and treat them as one pixel. So let's just say you've got a pixel that size, and you bin with 3 other pixels, 2 by 2, you get kind of a super pixel. And what's the advantage to doing that? You lose resolution, so that's not an advantage, but most of these scientific samples, we're not talking a landscape of the Grand Canyon, so resolution is mostly not important. What that means is, let's just imagine you have a big pixel, 1 big pixel compared to 4 binned pixels. If that pixel gets random shot noise in it, that big pixel, you know, that's essentially, that pixel is a noise pixel. But when you bin to a super pixel, if one of those pixels gets a noise signal, that's only 25% of the original signal. So your signal noise ratio goes up. So now let's move on to the quad bare sensor that is in the iPhone 16 Pro and also the 15 Pro. if you know, if you're at all proficient in digital photography, you understand that on an image sensor, in order to see color, you have color filters over the pixels, right? You have half of them are green filters, and the other half are divided evenly between red and blue. That's because we see most of the information we see is in the green. So the sensors attempt to kind of mimic that. So in a quad Bayer sensor, now you've taken each one of those pixels and replaced them with four pixels, 2 by 2. And you have the same green color filter. You have a green color filter over half of those binned pixels. And the other half of the binned pixels are evenly divided between red and blue. And so the whole point of all this is that it doesn't make a ton of sense to shoot in 48 megapixel mode on the iPhone 16 Pro, because the resolution gains are not that great, because you've got the same color filter over each set of 4 of those pixels. And so it's not a true 48 megapixel capture. You might get a little bit better resolution, but not a whole lot. As light levels drop, and people have commented on this, shooting 48 megapixels, your noise starts getting worse and worse, because you have that problem of a noise pixel is 100% of that small pixel. Whereas if you shoot it and you bin it to 12 megapixels, which is a mode on the iPhone 16 Pro, you can go into your settings and shoot 12 megapixels for everything. Then low light is not as big of a problem. So I have essentially changed the settings on this phone to 12 megapixel only. And the other interesting thing is if you look at the third-party apps, whether it's ProCam or Lightroom, the Lightroom camera, they only will shoot 12 megapixels in RAW. Okay, they will not shoot anything more than that. You're better off shooting 12 megapixels on these phones and then upsizing using something like Topaz Photo AI to a larger size if you need that. And Topaz Photo AI will work as a plugin in Apple Photos. So you can do that on your computer and it works in Apple Photos. Not exactly the same way that it works in Lightroom, because in Lightroom it creates a new file. In Apple Photos it applies the upsize to the original file, but you can undo that. If you revert it, it'll go back to the 12 megapixel file. To summarize, Apple and all these other camera companies that are talking about, oh, it's a 48 megapixel camera, that's just marketing hype. You should probably set your camera to the base megapixel setting, regardless of which phone it is. How often do you need bigger than 12 megapixels too? It's really not that often. You can print a 16 by 20 with 12 megapixels and it'll look pretty good. Just to give you a little history, I had the Canon PowerShot Pro 1. It was an 8 megapixel camera, and on the box it said print up to 16 by 20 photos, and you could do that. They'd look pretty good. I had a 12 megapixel Canon 5D, the original one. I shot events with it. I had people order wall size prints from 12 megapixels. That's it for now. If you have any comments or questions, leave them down below. I'm Todd Banner. I will see you next time.